for a clap, so then you have a connection.
Hi, Tamara.
Hello. I am good. Trying to deal with changes in the exhibition that were, given the circumstances, everything had to be modified for the circumstances, and something that will be an open exhibition now is going to be a film, and it's going to be shown in pictures and in video. So adapting to the circumstances, I guess.
Yeah, which is also something that the exhibition as a whole is dealing with, right? This adaptation, but also control and lose and lack of control. Right?
So I've been working in this subject for quite some years, and with the idea of like falling and how to let go control. Like actually, if we have any kind of control over life, let's say. So I've been talking with some people and some professionals about this subject and how this subject related to their practices. So from a neuroscientist to a body therapist. And basically I got a lot of like different answers, but basically what I got from it was that actually everything is temporary. So even if there is any balance or any like stable, it always is in relation to time, and also as if they are certain forces that are in tension to hold that stability. So there is also the idea that maybe the tension will go off and then that stability will break, as in a war or in a conflict, where the conflict is at the end the representation of the movement, but before it was just hold by this tension, and then this tension collapses and then it creates this chaos. So this been like the subject that started from the ceramic making to how the way things are installed in the space, through these conversations, and also ended up in this video performance that is going to be online soon. So approaching this subject from different perspectives, different materials, and with different inputs from different professionals as well, that it really helped me to build up the script for the performance, and and using also the space as a stage for that to happen, where many things happen also as accidents, or like basically many of the ceramics that were hanging in very fragile positions, they broke. So there is also this action in the space that it made it transformed as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that the sculptures broke, and when we spoke about that earlier, you said that it's not as much that they are objects that have to remain like this, but that they are props that have to be used. Can you say something about how they were used in the performance, in the video performance? Yeah,
so I think it was interesting because each of the performers were related to, maybe it's good to say that first, that the three performers I work with, they were working relating to traumatic situation in their lives. So basically how they did the work was actually very personal, very particular. So maybe one will use one object in one way, and then another one will use it in a completely different way. So really kind of like how an object can be so many things and be used differently and as a tool, no? That can be restored and reformed. So even before I haven't really considered the objects as props until I saw them interacting with them so actively, and then I understood that they actually made sense, that they could really go for it, and very bravely, because I think when you hold an object that is so fragile, my experience is that people get very scared, that they are like very carefully moving them around, and with them I felt that was there, but then there was this point where they overpassed it, and then it was really going for it, for the movement and for the relationship with the object.
Well, I think in the exhibition there are different practical solutions to how to support objects, both how they are hanging but also how they are on the floor, but I have the feeling that these mats were also designed for or made for people. So they were also used in a performance?
Yeah, they were. So first I made the objects that are on the walls and hanging, and this was the first approach to also the quality of how they are made. And then the second part was also, okay, why is the floor empty, and like why are only hanging when I actually also wanted to, in this part of my work in general, I wanted also to talk about the ending of the fall, or like the crashing. And I've been working with mats also before in different performances, and we're always these mats for gym. So I thought, well, maybe it's interesting to think about what it will happen if I actually make the mats for the performance, and also for the pieces to rest on, as also this kind of potential support in case of fall. So that was a little bit the idea of like building also these other supports apart from the holding and hanging, that I've been doing that for a long time. And now I'm also exploring, okay, what if they are on the floor as well? And if they can still relate to the fall, or if they can still relate to the unstable, or that process of movement, even though they are still or hold. I usually, in the collaborations I work with, there is a very open exchange. So there is, of course, some guidance and some frame for the work, but there is a lot of room for exchange and for input. And I appreciate when you are part of the work, but you are also the work. So it's so with them, when I explain them how the whole process of my interviews with these professionals went, and the subjects of understanding traumatic experiences as also this eruption, like how to say, like a difficulty on understanding how things happened. And then Rudolfine, who is a body therapist, she will explain me that also there is this therapy that it's all about like slowing down and understanding, or even visualizing what happened to you in a way that you can understand it with details, and even imagining yourself like hurting less, for example. So I came with all this information to them, and then suddenly we ended up talking about our mothers, and they explained situations of their own lives that, there was quite a traumatic scene. So then I basically proposed them to work in 3 solos based on these personal experiences. And then as a second stage, where the other 2 will come in their solos, and they will help them to go through that traumatic experience and to see also as someone who is next to someone who is struggling, how to support or how to also trust your own intuition of what the other one needs. I've been also researching a lot last year and the last few years about healing and alternative ways of narrating traumatic experiences, or how to deal with healing processes that not necessarily have to be done in a therapeutical environment, but it's more about how to share or how to connect with someone else, and what is it that it happens in this relation between each other, where you can be supporting of one another, and this dependency as well, like that we are all so much connected, and that we are always relying on someone else to be good, to be well. Yeah.
So would you say that art could be a tool for healing, or?
I think so. Yeah. I think for healing and for growing, I would say, for sure. But I think for healing in a sense of like to be able to analyze, or even this way that these therapists will call it, no, like this slowing down. But with art, you can do so many things to understand and to go deep into things, or to understand them from different ways. So, I definitely think it's an interesting space to explore these subjects, for sure. Yeah, mostly in these times where we are all going through a rough time, having to deal with new circumstances every day, and being restricted, and not understanding if what we do makes sense now, because there is also for art, I guess, also for me to have this exhibition and not being able to show it, it's like, why did I do all this, like, all this effort and all this energy put on this, and it's like, okay, but it makes sense because all these other things happen during the way, and so it's definitely also a reconsideration of my own practice, at least during this process of finding meaning. Maybe it's just better to embrace what we are going through, and then maybe that's it. That is to really be in a different media. But then it was still very intense to do the performance itself and to do the recording. And very challenging as well to be close to each other and doing this work as well in the production, no? And questioning, okay, are we too close? Are we like, how are we going to do this? And even questioning the way we are doing things. And also when is the moment that you have to let go, because that's the only way you can do it. So safety is always there in the back of my head for the last few months. And then safety also in the sense of like when things break and like that no one gets hurt, like all these other layers of like working with people and bodies, and like so it was also something to be aware of during the recording.
Yes. So that aspect of risk is always present in your work, not only when there's a pandemic.
Exactly.
Happening,
Yeah.
And speaking of time, you said already the past months, but the process, your residency has been very stretched. That was unexpected. which is maybe something that's happening a lot now, that things get suspended or stretched or take longer than they would do in other times.
Yeah.
Can you say something about it, or did you learn things from that?
Yeah, I guess it's been a lot of like waiting, like this idea of like, okay, I'm gonna do these first steps, and then I wait, and then maybe in a couple of weeks, maybe things change, and maybe we can do something else. So it's been a lot of like waiting for sure. Also trying to have things done and to try to close things, because I feel like in this moment it's also very difficult to say, okay, this is enough, or this is okay, now this is the limit, or because you have this constant stretching of time. So I think I struggle the most by having to push myself to close or to put limits to things when actually the process is not finished, or that's still my feeling. It's not that it have to be finished in a certain way, but at least in the planning that I had in my head on how things will go. But yeah, it's been like kind of like, okay, how to build up this closure of phases, and like to say, okay, this didn't work, maybe this will work. So I think with the film, it was a little bit this need for having something that I could share. And I felt quite relieved when I made that choice. When I made that choice was, okay, this may work. And so yeah, I'm very happy that I already recorded it, and then now I'm working on the editing, so it's going to be shared soon. But yeah, it's been a very, very long process, for sure. Yeah. In the performance, we work with different elements, like it just happened that their own stories related to different elements, but the vertical, or for me, it's the most unstable. Because then when we are standing, we have more chances to fall. Yeah. While if we are horizontal, there is less chances to get hurt. And we worked a lot with Tashi, one of the performers. His performance is mostly on the floor, so very horizontal. So for me, that was a new thing. I always work with these bodies that fall back and forth, and there is always like starting from some kind of like unstable verticality that ends up kind of horizontal. But it was interesting that one of the professionals that I talked to, she said that for her the only stable moment was death, because there is nothing else, which I found it quite shocking, but she was so sharp, and she said it very clear, and I thought, yeah, that kind of makes sense, that while we are alive, we are still moving, transforming constantly. So in that sense, it was interesting to research on this horizontality as well.
Maybe it's good to say something about what happens in the performance, or how, or
Well, basically they are like three very different presentations. There is always a movement from one place to another, so there is a starting point and an ending point. And basically there is an interaction with certain objects on the way. And I will say there is a lot of relation to sound also with this space. We really try to work or be aware of that, that we are going to have a very interesting soundtrack. And so I also, even though these pieces are very charged and are very personal and they are telling stories, even though they are not narrated with words. So it's also a challenge, let's say, how to tell a story through a solo or a dance piece or a movement piece, together with these elements, and how that comes across. And relying on the abstraction as well, like with counting that all this like research material is in the background and can still be reached through these abstract pieces.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge challenge to jump on, like for me at least, that I always like to rely on certain texts or certain subjects that can be explained, and then this is also a jump towards something more, less textual, let's say, less words and more movement.
Speaking of words, can you tell something about the title of the exhibition?
Yeah. So A Pool Without a Rim is actually a quote that Lisa is making in the book. And it's about a book about this woman who loses her kid, well, an adult kid, her son. And she explained this paralyzed time as a pool without a rim, like a time that is not, that is suspended and that is not paused but suspended. And this moment of like grieving and in relation to the time in the world, I guess. So I thought that we are in this kind of time right now where we are all experiencing this kind of loss or sense of loss of some kind of boundary or some kind of rim to hold on to. And also thinking about the traumatic experiences that, that the work is also relating to. So I was also very, called by this phrase, which it's also very clear in my head as an image as well. Yeah.
Happy, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.